Hello everybody and welcome back to Expert Examiner IELTS. My name is Glyn and in this video we're going to give some feedback on Frank's speaking test. So let's take a look. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Glyn. Would you please tell me your full name?
So, good afternoon. My name is Frank Levis.
And what should I call you?
You can call me Frank.
Great. Now, in this first part of the test, I'm going to ask you some questions about yourself. Do you work or do you study?
So, I'm actually a student. I am currently undertaking my bachelor's degree in.
So I'm currently undertaking my bachelor's degree. Everyone in the world is using currently at the moment. That's fine. But undertaking my bachelor's degree, this seems like this candidate is trying a little bit too hard. I'm doing my degree. I'm studying at university. Undertaking my degree just sounds a little bit try-hardy.
Economics with a minor in management. And it's a 3-year program. And in September, I'm going to start my second year.
Okay, but I like that. We have a nice variety. It's a 3-year program. I'm going to start. We have the full use of going to. There's nothing wrong with I'm going to start. If we want to get some points for connected speech, you could try changing it to I'm gonna start. That sounds a bit more natural. I'm gonna start. But there's nothing wrong with I am going to start. But as I say, you can score points for connected speech by saying I'm gonna start. And what do you like about your studies?
Well, first of all, it's
Like this, first of all, good signposting language.
a very large field. There's a lot of information and
Did we hear informations? A lot of informations. So, of course, information is an uncountable noun in English. It doesn't have a plural form. So, a lot of information, not a lot of informations.
topics that we can discuss in class. I like to discuss with my classmates about.
I like to discuss with my classmates about best construction, best word orders. I like to discuss something with my classmates. I like to discuss economics with my classmates. It sounds a bit strange with a word order. I like to discuss with my classmates about something. So word order just slightly strange.
The economies in the world, or just about also financial facts like interest rates or.
Okay, so demonstrating, in the right context, using the right type of language, right? I asked him what he likes about his studies, and so he's using, because he's studying economics, he's using topic-specific vocab like interest rates
Macroeconomic
and macroeconomics
policies.
policies.
That
So all of that is good topic-specific language, and he shows no hesitation in accessing this lexical resource. So good stuff.
that's what I like.
And what? So that's what I like. We often see this with candidates. They often feel like they don't know how to finish a sentence. Like they think, "Oh, and that is the end." It's normal. It happens. But if you can, just cut your speaking turns, cut your turn at a natural. Oh, I'm doing it myself. If you can end your sentence in a natural way without kind of thinking like a bit like yes, like this at the end. So something like, yeah, I get to talk about lots of different things with my group mates, things like the inflation rate and economic policy. So that's what I really like, and that's fine. What would you like to do after you finish studying?
So after I finished to study.
So we get a little bit of repetition, right? What do you want to do after you finish studying? But the candidate comes back, so after I finish to study. Now, we don't use this infinitive after finish. Finish to study, we don't use. Finish studying is fine, but you could also change it instead of the verb. You could change it to the nouns after I finish my studies or after I graduate from university. So thinking of ways to paraphrase and to avoid repeating the examiner's language is a good strategy. We can't always do this. Sometimes it is okay to repeat the examiner's language, but we certainly want to provide the examiner with enough information to say, hey, look, I can paraphrase your language. I don't have to mirror and repeat and echo your constructions. I can use my own. So the candidate here just echoes the examiner's question, and the only language he changes is to make a mistake, right? What would you like to do after you finish studying? And the candidate says, after I finish to study I blah 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 blah.
I am keen to pursue my studies in a master degree, in a master.
So I don't like it. I am keen to pursue my studies in a master's degree. I'm going to do a master's degree. I am keen to pursue my studies. I don't know anyone in the Anglosphere who speaks like this. The only people I know who speak like this are IELTS candidates who think that speaking like this will give them extra marks, right? I am keen to pursue my studies in a master's degree. Keen to, we can, like, keen on maybe sometimes is used to mean like, but I don't like it. The question is, what would you like to do? So, I would love to do something. I really want to do something. I'm hoping to do something. Those are all really natural ways of talking about our desire for the future. I would love to do something. I really want to do something. I'm hoping to do something. I am keen to do something sounds strange. And also, the pronunciation breaks down because the way that you delivered this sentence was because I think you are trying to access this impressive, difficult construction. It's breaking down your pronunciation. Notice how mechanical this answer sounds. I am keen to pursue. Listen to it one more time.
I am keen to pursue my studies in a master degree, in a.
So da 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 da. I am keen to pursue my studies. Da 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 da. It sounds unsure, as opposed to I'm hoping to do a master's degree. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. I'm hoping to do a master's degree instead of da 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 da. So that's unnatural intonation. So attempting to use that difficult language has not killed you, but it has brought your score down a little bit with vocab, but also with intonation. Because when you try to use overly difficult or unfamiliar language, it breaks down our fluency and pronunciation. But okay, let's keep going.
Master's degree in either finance or management. I still haven't decided yet, but
So I still haven't decided, fine. I haven't decided yet, fine. But I still haven't decided yet sounds a little bit strange.
I think I still have time to decide which one suits me best.
Cool. Really like that answer. It's complex in terms of its sentences. I haven't decided which one suits me best. It has one as a substituting pronoun. Really nice. And this type of natural language. So when Frank uses natural language, he's very, very strong. When Frank tries to use language that he thinks is impressive, his speech breaks down. Something that we can all learn from. Now I'd like to talk to you about walking. Do you like walking?
Yes, I like to walk. Honestly, I prefer to ride a bike, but I can also I like
So good intonation with it. Honestly, I prefer to ride a bike. Da 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 da. That's natural.
to yeah, I like to walk probably with somebody not alone, but yeah.
And how like that? But yeah, it's a nice way to end it. It's probably with someone, not alone. But yeah. How often do you go for a walk?
Uh, Probably
We do get a bit of latency. So latency is this gap between the end of the question and the start of the answer. Statistics tell us that latency gap in English natural conversation is 0.2 seconds. Obviously, in speaking tests, it's a little bit longer, and in interviews, it's generally a little bit longer. But still, I feel like there is a little, maybe just noticeable latency.
every day, but not for a lot of time, for maybe
Yeah, not for a long time, maybe is better. Not for a lot of time. Not for a long time.
1 hour maximum each day.
Yeah, 1 hour maximum, maybe is okay, but a maximum of 1 hour or 1 hour at most, maybe.
I would say.
I like this, I would say. That's fine. And what are some popular places to walk in your hometown?
So my hometown isn't very big, so it's very limited for walking.
Cool. I like this adjective limited. That's fair.
There are the same, like usual 2 or 3 gardens where you can walk with your friends or just sit and talk. Then another place where you can go to walk is the
So his chunking is good here, the way he groups his language. Another place you can go to walk is, so the way he groups his words together is natural, good for pronunciation.
uh, it's really small. There are not a lot of places where you can go to walk. Like
And that's, it seems, so an interesting thing you notice about not just Frank, but many candidates in general, is that they start to answer in like candidate mode, right? They think it is very limited for places to walk. There's just the same 2 gardens. And then when they think about it more, like Human Frank appears. And Human Frank, I like Human Frank's language. I think it's more impressive. I think it's better than Candidate Frank's language. Let's watch just that part again. I promise to stop replaying parts of this test soon. But just watch the way Frank starts to answer the question in candidate mode. And then when he realizes, like, oh, damn, there's nothing more I can say about my hometown, Human Frank comes out, and Human Frank is a bit more fluent and a bit more natural. Let's watch it again.
where you can go to walk is the uh, it's really small. There are not
Sorry,
or
let's go
three
back.
gardens.
Here we go.
So my hometown isn't very big, so it's very limited for walking.
So this is candidate Frank.
There are the same, like usual 2 or 3 gardens where you can walk with your friends or just sit and talk.
This is candidate Frank, and we're going to see Human Frank very soon.
Then another place where you can go to walk
Still candidate Frank.
is the uh, it's really small. There are not a lot of places where you can go to walk. Like
Notice how fluent real Frank is, right? It's really small. There are not a lot of places where you can go. He connects his speech. He's super fluent. The language comes out quickly. His voice sounds more conversational than presentation like. When candidate Frank speaks, it sounds like he's giving a presentation. When human Frank speaks, it's a lot more conversational. It's a lot more natural. And that's the stuff we want to see more of. We want to see more of human Frank, not candidate Frank. I know it's difficult. In a test, you prepare yourself like it's a presentation. You feel like you want to heighten your language to speak in a more professional way because it's an interview. We are here to judge your natural speaking abilities, so speaking in a natural way is so much better. Anyway, let's move on. This is taking too long.
it's just a road with a few parks and that's it. So
Okay,
it's very normal.
let's move on now and talk about noise and sounds. Are there any sounds that you really like?
Sounds. That's an interesting question.
So I like sounds, this repeating the keyword back. That's a normal way of responding, and it's better to do that um, than to keep silent.
If
I think, like, did he say that's an interesting question or that's a difficult question? I have to say I hate it when people say that's an interesting question or that's a difficult question. I just don't like it. I hear it all the time. In my life, I've tested thousand. Yeah, it must be approaching at least a couple of thousand people, either in a formal or an informal setting. Yeah, I've tested thousands of people. And when you've tested thousands of people and you ask them, like, okay, what did you do? What did you do last weekend? Oh, that's an interesting question. It's like, oh, stop it. Stop it. But okay, better than silence.
you mean like sounds, I like in music. I There are some sounds in music that I like, especially when there's the guitar in the background of the music. It really relaxes my ears.
Okay, so again, it sounds like he's trying to find an answer here. So, of course, speaking about the sound of music, that's fair. But when I interpret this question, are there any sounds that you like? I think of like birds singing or waterfalls, or maybe even some people like, the sound of traffic or something like this. I don't think about it as like something you listen to like actively like music, but that's okay. But the answer, like when the guitar is in the background of the music, it relaxes my ears. Like, okay, it's a fair answer, but okay.
But apart that, I'm not
Apart from, so except something, but apart from something. Except that, or apart from that, or even other than that.
sure.
And do you have any friends who speak really loudly?
Yes, well, my brother.
And again, I think we've activated human Frank here because he's talking about his brother. This is a real story, whereas the other ones, I'm not really sure if I genuinely believe that he likes speaking to his group mates about interest rates and economic policy. I'm not so sure that I believe Frank when he tells me that the sound of the guitar in the background of the music relaxes his ears. But I really believe him when he tells me about his brother.
My brother is probably the person that speaks the loudest in the world that I know. It
And so, because he's speaking about something that's real to him, I think his intonation is improving here and his fluency is certainly improving.
Each time his mouth opens, he really like for him, normal speaking is shouting. So yeah, definitely my brother.
And do your neighbors make a lot of noise?
Um, I've been very lucky in my life. My
Cool, really like this present perfect. I've been very lucky in my life, or I've been really lucky in my life. Very nice.
I've had a few neighbors because
I've had a few neighbors. I think he means I've had few neighbors or I've had very few neighbors. There is a difference between a few and few or very few. I think he means few or very few. I've had very few neighbors, really not many. If you're not sure of the difference, look it up. It's tricky to understand, but yeah.
the building where I live is like doesn't have has no neighbors. But when I had some neighbors, they were
So that seems a bit strange. The building where I live had no neighbors. So, like, if the building is a house, then, the house where I lived had no neighbors. You could say it's like a detached house, right? So, detached houses don't have, like, at least attached neighbors. Um, but the building where I live had no neighbors. To me, I think when you say building, I think of like a block of flats or something or an apartment tower. And to me, that sounds strange to live in a building with no neighbors. But okay, it's just a small, minor problem with coherence.
calm. They were especially old, so they weren't really active. They didn't make parties or
Such as collocation, we don't make parties in English, but we have parties. You can also use the verb to throw a party. They didn't throw parties, but have is the most common collocation. They didn't have parties.
or some kind of activities that made noise. So no.
Okay, thank you. Now, in this next part of the test, okay, so part one is done. So, what can we say about Frank, first of all? The first impression. So, firstly, he answers questions generally in full. He extends his answer. There's a nice length to them. His speech is a little bit slow at times, and there are noticeable breakdowns and reformulations. So, his fluency, he says something, then he goes back and he repairs it a little bit. Sometimes in the middle of sentences, you notice he's just trying to access a little bit of language. It's not critical. It doesn't kill his speech, but it does stop it from being like super smooth and flowing. His pronunciation is very clear. He's very easy to understand. There's no effort from the examiner. You don't have to listen carefully and try to work out what he's saying. He has a very wide range, possibly a full range of phonological features. Intonation sometimes breaks down, especially when he's trying to access more difficult language, but the chunking and the grouping of the words is generally good. There isn't a tendency for Frank's intonation to rise a lot when he speaks. Now, sometimes in modern English, there is a lot of rising, but still, for me, that would be just an example of maybe not perfect intonation. Very often, when people are unsure of themselves, they often speak with that rising intonation because it shows some doubts. And so, I think possibly maybe a little bit of nerves or a little bit of doubt is making him use rising intonation, which is affecting how natural that is. So at the moment, I'm thinking pronunciation 7, fluency 6, grammar don't know yet, 6 or 7, and vocab leaning towards 6 or 7. So for the moment he's probably on 6.5, maybe he can get to a 7. So in part 2, so I'm already right now, I already know about his fluency. I don't think his fluency is going to change. I already know about his pronunciation. I'm probably going to give him a 7 for pronunciation. Maybe a 7 for pronunciation, unless something drastically changes. But I really haven't decided with vocab and grammar yet. So in part 2, I'm going to focus mostly on grammar and a little bit on vocab. So with grammar, I want to just notice, if I can see a few examples, if I can hear a few examples of complex structures with the grammar, I might be tempted to give him a 7. I know there is a range of complex sentences and simple sentences, but I don't know if there's anything that stands out yet in the grammar. The best thing I've heard is I've been lucky all my life, or I've had very few neighbours, or I've had a few neighbours, a bit of present perfect, but I haven't heard anything else that shows a range of grammatical structures. So that's what I'm looking for in part 2. I'm going to give you a topic, and I would like you to speak about this topic for 1 to 2 minutes. But before
Okay.
that, you have up to 2 minutes to give your talk, and I'll let you know when the time is up. Can you
Okay.
start? Can you start speaking now, please?
Okay. So this
So one thing to notice here, describe a piece of advice that you recently received. So there could be some present perfect because it's recently, but probably if you notice the questions, they're all in past tense, right? When this happened, who gave you the advice, what the advice was. So whenever you have a part 2 that's in past tense like this, which asks you to tell a story, my brain as an examiner here is always going towards like, will we get past simple, I did something, past continuous, I was doing, past perfect, I had done something. Will we get other past constructions like I used to do something? Will we get past modals like I should have done, I could have done, I might have done, I would have done? Will we get other past modals like I had to do something, I could do something, I would do something? Those are the grammatical, that's the grammatical landscape, the potential we have here. Will we get that, or will we just get past simple? Past simple drives stories, that's true, but will we sprinkle a few extra nice grammatical constructions? Let's see.
thing happened this at the beginning of this year, and it was one of my friends in university that told me this, and he told me to stop seeking for.
Okay, so we get like a reporting structure that he told me to stop, but I think he says to stop seeking for something. Now, to stop seeking something or to stop looking for something, but seeking for something sounds a bit strange. Let's just listen to that part again.
One of my friends in university that told me this, and he told me to stop seeking for perfection.
Yeah, so to stop looking for perfection or to stop seeking perfection, but to stop seeking for perfection sounds strange.
So overall, I think I am a perfectionist. I try to do everything with.
So are we going a little bit away from the main topic here? I mean, he's stepping out of the narrative now to give extra information like overall I am a perfectionist, and that is kind of relevant, but the purpose of the task of course is to focus on that advice, right? What was the advice, when was it given, who gave you the advice, what was the advice, and also to say whether you thought this was good advice or not. So we want to shine that light on the advice more than who we are as people.
The best I can. And sometimes I tend to criticize myself for making the smallest mistake.
So notice how he shifted that from the main topic of the advice. Frank has shifted now to talking about present time, to who he is as a person, that he is a perfectionist, and now he's going to justify and explain why it's a good thing and why it might not be why it might not always be a bad thing. But that's shifting the focus a little bit too much for me.
And sometimes my friend told me that sometimes it showed that I was a bit like sad. If
So his fluency is also just getting a little bit worse here in part two. Obviously, when you have to speak at length, it's difficult to maintain a good flow of speech for 2 minutes. That's why this task is in IELTS. But it just seems to be a little bit more noticeable that he's trying to access language.
even if I achieved something good, but it wasn't perfect. So my friend told me this, and I thought about it multiple times, and he is right, but I still don't know what to change, because I think it's good to seek for perfection, because
It's good to seek perfection, it's good to look for perfection.
if you don't aim for the top, I don't think you can achieve.
Okay, so we get a first conditional here. If you don't aim for the top, I don't think you can achieve whatever. So a first conditional, but it doesn't blow me away in terms of grammar.
Achieve the top, but it is also true that it's not fair to criticize yourself or just not be happy,
Okay, we get a reflexive pronoun there. It's not fair to criticize yourself. I criticize myself. You criticize yourself. So that reflexive pronoun, that's decent, but still, B1-ish.
because you didn't get exactly what you wanted, and you just
Nice intonation there. You didn't get exactly what you wanted, putting the stress on exactly. That's good.
you nearly
Exactly is a focus adverb, and we often put our stress on focus adverb. I've just done it.
got it, just maybe for a few points, or not exactly what I wanted. So I think that I need to work on this, but I also don't think that I need to completely change this.
So we get the full form of to in his infinitives. I need to work on this, but I don't think I need to. So in connected speech, we have the weak form of to, right? So notice the difference. Strong form of to, I need to do it. Weak form of to, I need to do it. I need to do it. I need to do it. Need to do it. Need to do it. So Frank has the full form of to, which again, it's not, I can't say it's a bad thing to do that, but if we're looking for evidence of connected speech and good sentence stress, we want to see an awareness from the candidate to know that, hey, when we speak English, some words are pronounced with extra stress and some words are pronounced without stress, because English is a stress timed language, not a syllable timed language, right? You speak French, you say je suis désolé, da 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 da, je suis désolé, da 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 da. In English, we'd say describe a piece of advice that you recently received. Describe a piece of advice that you recently received. So you don't get the full form of a piece of advice. You don't get that full of. Describe a piece of advice, a piece of advice, a piece of advice. So those features of connected speech aren't present in Frank's, which means he certainly can't get an 8 for pronunciation. The question I have to ask myself is there enough? Are there enough good aspects? Are there enough good features without this sustained connected speech? Are there enough of those good features for a 7 for pronunciation? And I'm starting to have a bit of doubts. I'm between 6 and 7 with pronunciation now. Still not blown away by the grammar, but he hasn't finished part 2 yet. Let's let him finish.
This manner of viewing things. So
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the end of part 2. So I wanted to hear, looking at this task, thinking, okay, will we get a variety of past time constructions? We didn't get it. He focused on himself a little bit more about, the fact that he's a perfectionist and why he's a perfectionist and why it's okay to be a perfectionist, which is, fair. It is somewhat connected to the topic, but by doing that, Frank then doesn't allow himself to use the kind of grammar that he could have used in this task. So I'm still, at the moment, 6 for grammar. I think there is enough for a 7 for vocab. Still, the fluency is dropping kind of now towards the 6. At the beginning, I thought it was a 7. Now dropping a little bit towards the 6. Pronunciation between the 6 and the 7. So he's probably going to end up with 6.5, but let's see how he does in part 3. Again, part 3 has difficult questions, and this can be difficult to maintain fluency. Will there be latency? Will there be long gaps between the question and the answer? Will he be able to extend his answers when the questions are about unfamiliar topics? And also, will he be able to hit some vocab and maintain that 7? I don't think we're going to get anything special with grammar, but let's see. And can I notice enough good pronunciation features to award that 7, or am I going to drop it to 6?
So,
Sounds like a TV show. It's like, find out in the next episode of Expert Examiner IELTS. But let's see.
we've been speaking about, or you've been speaking about a piece of advice that you recently received.
Now I'd like to move on and talk about advice in general.
How important is it to have friends who can give good advice?
I don't know how important questions are great. Oh, it is absolutely essential. It is completely vital, or something like that. A lot of good synonyms for how important. I'm generally against students strategizing too much for the speaking test, but any of these how important questions, I think you can learn how to answer them. They are so common in IELTS that you can really, really, really practice how to deal with how important is how important are They come up in almost every test, so you can strategize the hell out of that one.
I think it is one of the most important things in life.
Great. It is one of the most important things in life. Very natural construction. One of plus superlative plus where. Very nice.
I think, first of all, friends are one of the most important things in life.
But then we repeat it, right? So it's like, you used it and it was great. It's one of the most important things in life. And then I think friends are one of the most important things in life. And when you repeat a construction back to back, it loses its good effect. You know, it's like telling a joke to someone and they laugh and it's like, wow, that's a funny guy. And then you tell the same joke over and over again. You think,
And good friends are even more important. And friends that can
So we just get repeating of important now. We've heard the word important 3 times already in Frank's answer.
give you advice on yourself or how you behave once, or just what you can do better in life. I think it's one of the most important things in life.
There you go. The 3rd time, one of the most important things in life, and the 5th time we hear the word important. So I'd like some more paraphrasing there. I'd like you to find a way to reformulate that same idea, but in a different way, right? So I think it's one of the most important things in life to have good friends. And another thing that is really meaningful is to have friends who can actually give you advice, right? So you can change important to meaningful or something like that.
It's like fundamental if you want to succeed.
I love that. It's fundamental if you want to succeed. Fundamental, cool, very nice.
I think.
And do you agree that it's better not to give advice unless someone specifically asks for it?
I think it depends. I think that sometimes people don't understand, like don't see that they are not.
Like this use of see instead of understand. They don't see that they are. This is good use of idiomatic language. A lot of people don't realize that when we talk about idiomatic language, we don't mean it's raining cats and dogs. This is a great example. People don't see that they are rude. And here we talk about see, not as in vision, not as in using eyes, but using our brain, understanding. So the use of see to mean understand is an example of idiomatic language. So please keep that in mind, that if you look at if somebody tells you you need to use more idioms, no. Idiomatic language, yes. This is a great example of idiomatic language, but it's not, it's raining cats and dogs. It's not my cup of tea.
Behaving correctly, or that they're making a mistake, and sometimes these kind of people just don't ask for advice because they think they are right. But you, as a good friend, I think you should give them advice, even if you just think that something they did is not the right thing, or if they.
So Frank is really demonstrating demonstrating here a really good willingness to speak at length and showing no pain, right? It doesn't look like it's difficult for him to expand and develop his answers. I feel like as a human here, Frank is trying to explain his idea to me, and I think he's doing a very good job of doing it. So really, fluency and coherence is bouncing up again now.
You could do better. I think even if they don't ask for it, you should
Love this, even if they don't. Even if they don't. I really, really like this construction.
tell them, I think.
Can you give some specific examples of this? So I'm trying to drill down now. One of my favorite things about part 3 is that it allows me to dig deeper into the candidate's answer. So in part 1, I can ask why or why not. But in part 3, if someone says something and I feel like they could give more details, I love to respond and follow up and press them. It's interesting for me to see how they respond, because a lot of people get it into their head that, okay, the examiner will ask me a question, I will answer, and then the examiner will go to another question. But I like doing this as an examiner in part 3, digging more deeply into a candidate's answer. Let's see if we can get examples of this. So, if just to remind you, I know we're pausing a lot here, right? So Frank said that my first question was, do you agree that we shouldn't give advice unless someone specifically asks for it? Frank says, well, no, because sometimes people don't really understand that they're behaving incorrectly. And so sometimes, they need a friend to come in and say like, hey, dude, you need to stop doing this. But now I'm asking for specific examples. Now, my examples, when I think of like this unsolicited advice which we give to people even if they don't answer, even if they don't ask for it. When I ask this question, I think for people with maybe alcohol problems, or people with gambling addictions, or maybe people who don't clean the house, or people who don't wash, people who smell, or something like this. Sometimes this advice can be really useful for these people even if they don't ask for it. So those are the examples that I had in my mind as the most natural answers, but let's see what Frank gives.
So I don't
Struggling to access a prime example.
have an example, a personal example, but
Doesn't matter if you don't have a personal example, it's okay.
in general, maybe if you are at the restaurant with a friend and he meets.
So notice this repetition of he. It's a breakdown in fluency. It's okay. There's a natural disfluency. It happens, but maybe he's just trying to access language, which can pull the mark down a little bit for fluency.
Meets someone new, and he speaks to them with a tone that not with a good tone.
So you can see the effort here. So in that first question, I mentioned that Frank was speaking at length without noticeable effort, and in the second question, now there is noticeable effort. And so that's the tricky thing for examiners, right? When we get this criteria, and it looks beautiful, right? The candidate speaks at length without noticeable effort. Great. But what do we do when the candidate sometimes speaks at length without noticeable effort, and sometimes there is noticeable effort? And as an examiner, you have to think of the test on the whole. Not every question, but on the whole, can I say that Frank speaks in general at length without noticeable effort? Or in general, do I say that Frank speaks, he's willing to speak at length, but usually with noticeable effort? So I have to make that decision, and that can be the difference between like a 6 and a 7 here.
Or if like you just met him and you speak to him as a friend, I would tell him, hey, look, maybe you should talk to this person a little bit better, or you just met him, so like look out for the words you tell them.
All right. Yeah, look out for the words. I don't know. You tell them. Sounds a bit grammatically and vocab strange. Look out for the words you tell them. Be careful about what you say to them. That's maybe a more natural way of saying what you want to say.
Something like this.
Let's move on now and talk about advice in other contexts. What role does advice play in the workplace?
Can you please rephrase the question?
So absolutely fine in part 3 to ask the examiner to rephrase the question. It is a discussion, not an interview, so the examiner can rephrase it. So the original question was, what role does advice play in the workplace? But I decided to rephrase the question, not with the same meaning of the question, but just to get Frank talking about advice in the workplace. And then I will ask a follow-up question to dig a bit more deeply into it. Dig deeper. How do some people give advice when they work with each other?
Well,
So I'm just activating the background schemata of advice at work, and then we will get into something a bit trickier.
maybe when you work with someone, you want that this person achieves the best.
So want that somebody does something isn't a construction in English. Think that somebody does something, believe that somebody does something, know that somebody does something, understand that somebody does something, say that somebody does something, all good. Want that somebody does something. Construction is want somebody to do something. So not if you want that somebody does something, but if you want somebody to do something. So that want plus object plus infinitive. Ask somebody to do something. Tell somebody to do something. Expect somebody to do something. Advise somebody to do something. And want somebody to do something.
In his workplace. So maybe
Why his workplace? It could be a female colleague.
you would just learn with him, or just make him.
Why him? It could be a female. So if it could be a male or a female, we usually use this pronoun they, them. This isn't like a feminist intersectional thing. This is just the way that we speak. If we don't know if someone is a man or a woman or whatever, then we use they, them, right? So we're looking for a teacher. They must be qualified and they will need to prepare their own materials for themselves, right? It's one person, but we use they, them because it's a gender neutral pronoun.
Make him see
Him or her, them.
what he could do better
Or she, her, they.
in his work. Maybe show him how you could do something better. I don't know.
Okay, we get a repetition of idea. Again, this is in the criteria that if the candidate can only speak at length, if they rely on repeating their ideas, then that pulls their score down a little bit. I'm still not decided between the 6 and the 7 with fluency. It's going to be tough. And do you think it's okay for workers to give advice to their bosses? So now we get into a real difficult, maybe it's not a super difficult question, but it's something you don't think about every day, right? Should workers be able or be allowed to give advice to their bosses? Not something you think about every day.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the boss is the one.
Like the intonation, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Almost like they're surprised that you would be asked such a question. So this is a good feature of pronunciation when you can convey more than just meaning. You're not just saying the one thing, like absolutely, but you're showing it not just with your words, but in your pronunciation. Absolutely. Good.
The one who commands, the one who tells everybody what to do. But I also think
So get a bit of repair. Everybody what to do. A bit of repair work is noticeable, and I think that is noticeable throughout the test, not just in this answer, but a lot of repair work.
that the employee should give a
Employee. Stress on that last syllable. Employee, not employee, but employee. Employee. Da 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 da. Employee.
advice to the boss, maybe on how to manage better a team, or make
How to manage a team better, not how to manage better a team. Strange word order.
better decisions for the enterprise, or just in general. It's not because the boss controls everything that everything he does is correct. So I think.
Or she. Sorry, I'll stop mentioning these pronouns, but do be careful about them. It can be, I know that Frank's use of he and him here isn't a sign that he's sexist and he only thinks that men can be the boss. I know that, but sometimes there could be that, interpretation or that association. So be careful if you're talking about words like boss, manager, teacher, police officer. All of those positions could be male or female, and so we tend to use they, them, their, themselves, and so on.
The employee should give advice to the boss.
And do you think professional advisors like counselors or psychologists or financial advisors give better advice than friends and family?
I don't think so, because friends and families know your situation better than everyone. So a financial analyst may give you some good advice, but I don't think he has the overall picture
Or she.
of your life. So maybe I think a mix of the two would be perfect. Someone who is competent and
I like that. A mix of the two would be perfect. Someone who's competent and
knows what he's speaking about, but also someone who knows maybe some deep facts of your life. Or yeah.
okay, thank you. That is the end of the test. Okay, so usually there aren't many problems scoring. There aren't many problems scoring these candidates usually, but this one kind of tough. So fluency and coherence, I am going to go with the 6. I'm sorry. So in general, you develop your answers well, and it is easy to understand your central idea. However, there are noticeable mid-sentence hesitations and a lot of repair work in your speech. Your cohesive devices, your linking words are fine, good enough for a 7, I guess, signposting language. But the thing that's pulling your fluency and coherence down to a 6, that's those mid-sentence hesitations, the and the repair work. Everybody, right? When you attempt to say a word or you attempt to start a sentence a couple of times, 2 or 3 or 4 times, I feel like there are just too many instances of that for a 7. So I'm going to give you 6. Lexical resource, I think this is enough for a 7. So you demonstrate a wide range of vocabulary and use simple words as well as topic specific vocabulary, speak especially when you're talking about your studies, and also when you're talking about advice and advisors and things like that. There was topic specific vocabulary there. You show some awareness of collocation, but there are a few mistakes which don't really cause much confusion. So, to make a party. Okay, do we say make a party? No, we say have a party. Is it a problem? No. You say to seek for perfection. Do we say seek for perfection? Not really. Look for perfection, seek perfection, but not seek for perfection. Do I understand what you mean? Yes. So lexical resource, you do have a wide range, it is fine, but just some of those collocations break down. Perhaps you could attempt some more paraphrasing. You didn't really speak about it much, but you don't want to echo the language of the examiner back too much. Do you like this? Yes, I like this. Or what do you want to do? I want to do this. Or how long have you been working there? I've been working there for So echoing the constructions of the examiner too much is a problem. There wasn't much of it, but it was noticeable for a couple of questions. But okay. Grammatical range and accuracy, I have to give 6 here. So in general, accuracy, your accuracy, scroll down, your accuracy is good. And you have many examples of back-to-back error-free sentences. So there are examples where, listening to you, it's like, there are 2 or 3 or 4, maybe 2 or 3 sentences without any grammatical mistake. So in general, your grammatical control is good. However, and also, you also use a mix of simple and complex sentences. Most people, anyone who's intermediate or above uses some complex sentences. If they're just linked with because or and or but or so or although or despite or something like this. However, you could definitely use a wider range of structures. So again, if we think about that part 2, you could have used, let's look at that part 2. Describe a piece of advice you recently received, right? Let's do this very quickly. So the other day I was hanging out with my friend Bob, and it was the first time I'd seen him for a few weeks. Anyway, Bob always likes giving me advice, and he told me in no uncertain terms that my clothes look terrible. I was a bit offended at first because I thought, like, hey, these are my clothes, there's nothing wrong with them. But now that I think about it, I think he was probably right. When I was younger, I used to wear all of these like sports clothes. I never really cared much about fashion, but as I've got older, I've started thinking a bit more about it. So what do we notice in here? I use used to. As I've got older, I've started thinking more about it. I was with my friend Bob the other day, who I hadn't seen in a while. Past perfect, right? That's a good range of grammatical structures in there. Frank only really uses past simple to drive his story, and then steps out of the narrative and uses present simple to talk about why it's okay to be a perfectionist. So more range of grammar would have been nice, but still enough for a 6. Pronunciation, I'm also going to go with a 6 for this. So you have a very, very, very wide range of phonological features. So phonological features in English, the pronunciation of vowels and consonants, and the b and the k, and nasality, the and the sh and the ch, and things like this. So you have let's say a wide range of phonological features. Also, your speech is clear and easy to understand. Your intonation is great at times, but there is a tendency for you to overuse rising intonation. Rising intonation, my friend from the shop, when I went over there. So you have a tendency to overuse rising intonation when it's not appropriate. Additionally, you speak carefully, and this results in a lack of connected speech features. If you're not sure what connected speech is, look it up online. Connected speech is strange in English, but to get that 7, we need some examples of this connected speech. But to get that 8 and 9, you need to sustain that. So I just felt like there were, and probably this is connected to fluency, but at times it felt like each word was being pronounced individually, and the sentence stress, you get the full form of to, need to, do it, things like this. Just a little bit mechanical, but as a careful speaker, that's normal. So what do we have? 6, 7, 6, 6. So in total, this gives you a score of between 6.0 and 6.5. If you got this 6, 7, 6, 6, of course, 0.25 rounds up to 0.5. So in effect, in short, to cut a long story short, your overall score is 6.5. Things to work on. So what meaningful advice can I give here about things to work on? Okay. Think about what the question invites you to do in terms of grammar. So I don't think you think about this, right? Well, the questions are designed usually with some grammar and vocab in mind. So it's like, if it's something like, oh, how have things changed in your country in the last 50 years? We're looking for the language of change. It used to be like that. It's not like that anymore. It has changed a lot. We don't do this anymore. There's a tendency nowadays for people to do this. People were doing this more and more in the past, but nowadays they prefer to blah, 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 blah. So that every question has an invitation to use some type of grammar. Now, if you're not a hardcore like grammarian who knows all of these rules of grammar, this can be difficult. But just think about how you can exploit questions to get a wider range of grammatical structures. Because I think probably you do know that grammar, you just can't find the way to exploit it. Another piece of advice, only for part 1, don't worry about trying to find impressive. impressive vocab, undertaking a degree. There were a couple of other examples in part one. I've forgotten exactly what they are, but if you rewatch the video, you'll see. So don't worry about trying to find impressive vocab, right? Examiners know when you are trying too hard to use impressive vocab. It breaks the flow of your speech. It's very obvious what you're trying to do, and examiners aren't impressed by that stuff. Some of them are, but it's difficult. There are lots of examiners. We all like different things, but in general, try to speak in a natural way. Can I mention anything else? I always like to give 3 bits of advice. Yeah, maybe intonation. So I understand that you can have doubts in your speech, especially if you're nervous, but be careful about how these doubts can affect your intonation. I think there were some aspects of connected speech, and I just think if you fix that intonation, you can get a 7 in that pronunciation. So you, as I mentioned, you have this tendency to use the rising intonation, because like you're speaking, then you kind of go up a little bit, and that's like something that we do when we're not always sure of ourselves. So the doubt or the nerves that you have affects your intonation, I think. It's my interpretation, I don't know for sure, but be mindful of that. But in general, very good. 6.5, of course, is the upper end of upper intermediate. It's right on the border between upper intermediate and advanced. What will Frank get in his real test? Will I be surprised if he gets a 7? No. Will I be surprised if he gets a 6? No. Anything else, I would be surprised. I don't think he'll get 7.5, and I'm sure he won't get 5.5. This video feels like it was a little bit longer than the other videos, so sorry about that. Hope you managed to stay till the end. It's still writing feedback in June because I haven't changed it yet, so I will leave it for a couple of days. If anyone wants to send more writing, I will check it for a couple of days, but we will move on to a new focus in July. And as always, I do have a bit of time to do some free practice speaking tests, so if you would like an absolutely free practice speaking test with lots of expert feedback specifically about your speech, then do get in touch. All of the information is given below. But for now, I'm going to leave it there. Cheers and bye-bye.